For the first time in history, the United States, a nation that had long stood in ideological opposition to the Soviet Union, poured its full strength into saving the one it had once called its sworn enemy. From thousands of tanks and aircraft, to millions of tons of food and medicine, to Arctic convoys carrying strategic materials through blizzards and the deadly fire of Nazi guns. They even sincerely prayed that the Soviet Union would stand firm in this war. Why was this so? By the summer of 1942, World War II was entering its most desperate phase. Europe had almost entirely fallen into the hands of Nazi Germany, from Poland, the Netherlands, and Belgium, to France, all crushed in the blink of an eye. In the skies, swarms of black steel birds roared. On the ground, armored columns ground villages and cities into dust. Britain was exhausted, standing on the verge of collapse. On the Eastern Front, the German army struck the Soviet Union with a furious offensive. They smashed entire Soviet armies, along with countless aircraft and tanks. In a short time, the mighty Volga River lay before them. And on the western bank of the Volga, the Soviet soldiers and citizens swore to defend Stalingrad to the last. The words "beyond the Volga, there is no land for us," were not merely a rallying cry. They were the stark truth. Behind them lay Moscow. If Stalingrad were to fall, Nazi Germany would swallow the Soviet Union whole, and then the United States would become the final target on Hitler's path to the pinnacle of world domination. Faced with a life-or-death situation, the Soviet Union transformed itself into a colossal war machine, operating with only one objective: to hold Stalingrad at all costs. Divisions from distant fronts were pulled back, despite the risk of weakening defenses elsewhere. Factories from the rear to the front lines accelerated their output, assembly lines roaring non-stop with the production of tanks, aircraft, and artillery. Even small workshops inside the city worked day and night, assembling rifles and shells amid the thunder of bombs and choking smoke. Men, women, and even teenagers barely old enough to carry a rifle were mobilized, turning every street and every shattered building into the final fortress of their lives. Indeed, this was a massive and bloody battle. The Soviets deployed the 62nd, 64th, and later the 66th Armies, supported by artillery, tanks, and air power. An initial force of about 1 million troops was continually reinforced across the Volga, despite relentless bombing. They had over 13,000 artillery pieces, about 900 tanks, and more than 1,100 aircraft, most produced rapidly from factories dismantled and reassembled right at the front. On the Axis side, Hitler committed the full might of the German 6th Army under General Friedrich Paulus, along with part of the 4th Panzer Army. They brought more than 1 million troops, over 10,000 artillery pieces and mortars, around 1,000 tanks, and 1,200 aircraft from the Luftwaffe and their Romanian, Italian, and Hungarian allies. Two colossal war machines now faced each other, separated only by crumbling walls and streets littered with the burnt-out hulks of tanks. The Battle of Stalingrad was no longer a conventional fight. It had become a struggle for every meter of ground, every brick, where each soldier knew whoever yielded would die, and whoever stood firm would rewrite history. On August 23, 1942, the sky over Stalingrad suddenly darkened. Hundreds of German bombers appeared like a massive flock of crows, unleashing thousands of tons of incendiary and high-explosive bombs. Whole districts turned into seas of fire, with thick black smoke rising to blot out the sun. Within hours, over 40,000 civilians were dead. Stalingrad was no longer a city, but a blazing ruin. Yet those ruins became the Red Army's greatest ally. When the Germans advanced, they no longer faced straight boulevards, but a labyrinth of rubble, bomb craters, and shattered walls. Every floor, every basement concealed a sniper, a machine gun nest, or an anti-tank team armed with Molotov cocktails. The battle devolved into endless close-quarters combat. In the morning, a building belonged to the Germans. By afternoon, the Soviets had retaken it. By night, the Germans stormed it again. The same room could change hands 5 times in a single day. Gunfire erupted from every direction, from windows, from basements, from piles of debris in the streets. Soldiers fought until their last bullet, and when the bullets were gone, they fought with bayonets, shovels, even their bare hands. In November 1942, after nearly 3 months of savage fighting, the Soviets launched their decisive counteroffensive, Operation Uranus. The goal was not to attack Stalingrad directly, but to strike at the weakest flanks of the German forces, held by Romanian and Italian troops. In the skin-splitting cold of the Russian winter, thousands of Soviet guns roared in unison. Waves of Soviet tanks and infantry surged across ice and snow, breaking through the thin Axis lines.
Stay down!
Within
They are
days,
getting closer!
2 Soviet pincers from the north and south met at Kalak, encircling the entire German 6th Army under
Hold out to the
Paulus
last man!
inside Stalingrad. Hitler ordered them to hold to the last man. He promised to resupply them by air, but the Luftwaffe could deliver only a fraction of what was needed. German troops starved, froze, and succumbed to disease in their dugouts. In December, the Soviets launched Operation Saturn, driving the Germans from the Don region and cutting off all hope of relief. By January 1943, the situation inside Stalingrad was hopeless. On January 31st, General Paulus was forced to surrender. The battle ended, leaving behind horrifying consequences. Only 91,000 German soldiers emerged from the ruins alive, out of more than 300,000 who had entered. They were starving, freezing, and many could no longer stand on their own. The Axis losses were staggering. Over 150,000 soldiers were killed, around 110,000 were taken prisoner, and only a few thousand of them would ever see Germany again after the war. Thousands of tanks, artillery pieces, and aircraft were destroyed or abandoned on the battlefield. The Soviet Union also paid a terrible price. More than 1.1 million Soviet soldiers were killed or wounded, including over 480,000 who never returned home. Stalingrad was almost completely leveled, and hundreds of thousands of civilians perished in the bombings and from starvation. Yet this victory changed the entire course of World War II. It shattered the myth of Nazi invincibility and forced Hitler's armies onto the defensive across the entire Eastern Front. From Stalingrad, the Red Army began an unrelenting counteroffensive, pushing the Germans back step by step, all the way to Berlin, more than 2 years later. The Battle of Stalingrad was not merely a military triumph. It became a symbol of unbreakable will, of extraordinary endurance, and of the determination to fight to the very end to defend the motherland. And from that day forward, human history turned a new page.